I introduce? Yeah.
Sure.
All right. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hearing Things with Julie and Brad. I don't think we've actually said that in the last couple episodes.
I don't remember the last couple of episodes.
Fair enough. So what we're going to do this week is first of a two-parter on Christmas. And so, which is kind of funny since I'm Buddhist. But anyway, I went to Catholic schools. I grew up Baptist. So what we wanted to do is, as the old saying goes, which I guess isn't too old, is put the Christ last in Christmas. And so we're going to talk today about church and how it's tough to be hearing impaired in church. Not specifically in here in like a Christmas Eve Mass, although I don't know about you, but a couple of times when I was growing up, I went to the Midnight Mass.
Yeah,
on Christmas
we did that
Eve.
a lot. It was fun.
That was fun. Like you have the little candles and the paper cup. So I didn't hear much of what was going on, but so
right.
I do remember like First Baptist Church is where I grew up, and so like we would sit. My nan had the pew 7 rows from the altar.
She had her own pew.
Yeah, well, it was like her pew, and everyone else knew.
Everybody kind of knew.
Not to cross name.
Oh, nan.
Yeah. So we had that, and so like I'll start us off here. It's like I had so many problems hearing the sermons.
Yep.
We had it's a little different Protestant and Baptist and Catholic, Christian faiths, but just a little different. So there was no like getting up for communion and all that stuff. Not every time. But one thing I always had problems with was people who come up and like read part of the gospel. Like I'm not used to their voices, right? And so like it was difficult to like learn the voice to hear them. The minister, as they're called in Baptist tradition, he had a really like soft-spoken voice. Ooh. And so I had a very hard time hearing him.
Thanks.
I went to St. Charles and Arlington Catholic, and so we had monthly Mass at both those places, and that was actually Mass. And Julie and I were talking about this earlier, is like, coming from Baptist, I did not stand up, sit down, kneel down, stand up, sit down.
Very aerobic activity.
There was no aerobics
in
the Baptist tradition. But I remember the first time they did Peace Be With You? So
yes.
like I did not hear what the priest was saying, and all of a sudden, everybody else is like turning around.
Turning around. What's going on?
So I just kind of like went with the flow. Somebody stuck their hand out, so I shook it. And
that was my favorite part of Mass when I was a kid.
Socializing, of course it was.
To say hi to everybody. I thought it was awesome, and it never went on long enough.
No.
No, for me, I always needed like another couple of minutes to make sure I got to everybody.
Yeah. So what about you? So what are your you've been hearing?
Same thing. Yeah? I mean, we were raised Catholic, and the church we went to, luckily, they always had the printed, I think they're called the missals, the little books, that listed out, all the readings and the Psalms and everything. So I at least had the print backup. Mm-hmm. But even with that, if a reading was going on, I could follow along with the reading. But when the priest would come down to do the homily or his sermon, it was brutal. Because a lot of the priests that came through our church had unfamiliar accents to me anyway. Some are non-native English speakers, so they have very strong accents.
Interesting.
And that made it really challenging. And as a kid who can't pay attention anyway, as an adult who can't really pay attention to anything, as a kid it was made that much more challenging to maintain church-appropriate behavior. So I would have to come up with strategies to keep myself somehow looking like I'm going to behave myself and not get super distracted. So I would take the missal and I'd like look at a reading and I would literally do things like count all the vowels in a reading just to keep my mind going. Or I'd make up stories about the stained glass. I got nothing out of any sermon, any homily, whatever you want to call it, ever. Because I could never understand it. And it was such a hard time for me to sit there. At least the rest of the service, there was familiarity, routine to it. So like when they would, bless the host and do that whole thing, I knew it was coming. I knew the words, so I could kind of follow that. But it was just brutal.
It's tough.
It was really, really hard. And like I said, for a kid that, is kind of social, distracted, looking at, getting everybody else's business all the time, was made even more so. And as an adult, I don't go to worship services for that reason.
Yeah.
Because it's just that much more difficult, as my hearing is decreased, to be able to get something out of it. So for me, I get more out of being in nature or my own spiritual practice or going to special places like the Japanese temple at the NIV, which we'll talk about in a couple of episodes. That's kind of more where I get my spiritual fulfillment.
So it's interesting
than an organized ceremony.
I know you're not alone because since I've been involved in the HLAA, one of the platforms of their advocacy is hearing loops, and one of the biggest places for hearing loops is church. So a hearing loop is just I don't know. Have we talked about this before? I can't remember. So if this is a rehash, I'll go quickly. So a hearing loop is a copper coil that's looping the room. and the copper coil is attached to the AV system, and we have little copper coils in our hearing aids. And so what that does is that plays the homily or whatever, as long as the guy is using a microphone, and directly into our hearing aids. And I know that a lot of churches,
that'd be a game changer for me.
Yeah, a lot
For
of churches do that for that reason, because a lot of congregation are older and hearing aid users, and so if they have the copper coil and the person knows how to use the copper coil, you can wear it. So I'd be interested to see if the church you went into as a kid had a hearing loop.
It's no longer there. But I wonder if they would have had that now in current time, if it was able to sustain itself.
Yeah, the advertisement of what places have a hearing loop is so bad, and so like one of the things I'm doing in my library is trying to get that list somewhere to spread the word, because like people like us, I would benefit so greatly from when I was in high school. I didn't have hearing aids, so it wouldn't have helped me anyway, but it would have helped. It would have helped.
Oh,
you.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
For sure.
So what do we have here? We have something about someone had to be between your cousins. You want to talk about that?
Look.
Yeah. You want to talk? No.
There's a story behind that.
Okay,
one.
let's do it.
So my cousin Sherry, who's my best friend, she's the closest thing I have to a sister. Our brothers were always altar service, so they always had something to do during Mass, okay? And Sherry and I, at that time, they wouldn't let girls be altar service, so we had to sit. And as we know, I can't sit. So my mom was a vocalist, and my uncle Sherry's dad played the organ for the church, and especially for the holiday Mass, it's a Christmas Mass. So one particular Christmas Eve Mass, okay, my fault. This is all my fault. They let us go up in the choir loft. So Mom was singing and Uncle's on the organ. So we felt like we get a little bit of a reprieve here because the boys got to do something cool. So we finally got a shot. Well, Mom was singing A Holy Night. And there's a line, fall on your knees. And I thought it would be absolutely hysterical if Sherry and I fell on our knees in the choir loft. That'd be an absolute riot. So this is the afternoon Mass on Christmas Eve. So my mother, in a gorgeous, my mom sings. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah. Gorgeous operatic trained soprano voice, sings this line. Sherry and I kunk forward. I think it's the funniest thing ever. And they were not happy with us at all. So we had to do double Mass that day. That was Christmas Eve afternoon. And then we had to do the Christmas Eve night Mass because they were singing again and the boys were serving. So our grandfather had to sit between us.
Yeah, we can't be
we
nice.
We lost the privilege
to sit next to each other.
Sitting together. And that's a privilege that we have lost many times in our lifetime. We are now 50 and 47, and we still have trouble.
Can't sit next to each other.
For sure.
I expect nothing else.
That happens.
I expect nothing else.
I know. I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quieter environment, right? The church, theoretically, unless you got people falling on their knees.
It was worth it.
Yeah, probably. So it's just challenging. For anybody, and it's probably not just people with hearing loss. It depends on the acoustic, right? Because churches, unfortunately, are hurting, right? Because you need the technology in order to have the service. So so that's us. So if you guys have any, we need the books, right? Yeah, books.
Yeah.
Okay, so books. So go for it. So what do you got?
I'm in love with this. This is the first book I've read that specifically is connected to the deaf and hard of hearing community.
Okay.
And one of my projects that I've just started, that you and I have talked about, is I'm actually doing an audit of our school library.
That's awesome.
I pulled all of the books I could find that were categorized as deaf or hard of hearing. And one of my missions is to eradicate Helen Keller from the curriculum. That's another show.
Yeah.
But I'm
true.
doing a big review of our school library and kind of see like what's out there and what should we keep, what should we read out, what other newer things are there that we can enrich our library with. So I just started this project. It's so exciting. And this book was fantastic. It's by Jacqueline Woodson and it's called Feathers. And it takes place in the 1970s. And it's about a group of African American children. And one of the big characters is the narrator's brother, who just happens to be deaf. And I love that so much, because he just happens to be deaf, and it has nothing to do with him being a central character. No one is learning a lesson from him. It's not like a big focus, and it's not that cliche that you bump up against most books that feature people with disabilities or that are not typical.
Does it inform like interactions with him? So
it's fantastic. So like there's sign language involved, and when they're speaking in sign, the words are italicized. Which is super cool. So you're able to differentiate between the type of dialogue, And it's just so good. The storyline is great and it has nothing to do with the brother being deaf, and I loved every second of it. So this is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it to children and adults. It's called Feathers by Jacqueline Woodson.
It's on my list.
Love
now.
it.
That's for sure. It's great. So I have something not inspiring at all. So I have
That is a classic.
Good Omens by
Such a
Terry
classic.
Pratchett, Neil Gaiman. I read this years ago. I just recently reread it.
Did you reread it? It's
I
fun.
reread
It's a
it.
fun
I
one.
reread it years ago, or just like last month. And it's about the end of the world. And so it's an angel and a demon are trying to find the Antichrist. And the Antichrist was a baby mix-up at a Satanist church and given to the wrong child. And so the hellhound comes, and it comes to the wrong child. And it's Terry Pratchett, so talk about dry humor. I mentioned Douglas Adams a couple of episodes ago. Terry Pratchett is right there. He continues the traditions of that dry, hyperbolic British humor.
Yep.
And Neil Gaiman is a great horror writer, so you can tell which person wrote which scenes. And they made I haven't seen it yet, but Amazon has a TV show
The
on
miniseries,
it.
yeah.
Miniseries,
I haven't
yes,
seen it
I've
yet
seen
either, but I saw that it was
But
out.
so church, angels and demons. I thought it was thematic.
Angels and the demon on the couch. Kind of also fitting over here for sure. Yep, I'm definitely the devil that's on your shoulder. and
Yeah,
happens like
for
bad
sure.
ideas all the time.
I do some weird stuff with her.
Absolutely.
Anyway, before this takes a nosedive,
All right.
that's our show. Comments below if you have any stories about church, otherwise, hard of hearing or otherwise.
Let us know.
Let us know.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.